welcome to take your jackets off tonight, but some of you obviously, or most of you have preempted that, and taken off your ties as well. So good evening, and welcome members, officers and people in the public gallery, and to everyone who's watching on YouTube tonight. It's the first formal, the first formal council meeting of the municipal year. So for those watching online, my name is Councillor Tesh Taylor, Mayor of Ealing, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. And let me thank my friend Christopher Geeks, who's just provided reflection tonight. And I think also in addition, given us some news today, conveying my condolences and thoughts to the families of those affected by actually, hang on.
Apologies for lateness from Councillor Sahota. Sorry, they've just come in now. She's in traffic and on the way.
Is that the same one? Yeah, same one.
Also from Councillor Kim Nagpal, who is also late.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any councillors present virtually, Sam?
Yes, we have Councillor Baines present virtually.
Okay. Right, declarations of interest. Hang on, I haven't asked the question yet. Are there any declarations of interest? If yes, any declaration of interest, sorry, am I supposed to say this bit? Yeah. Any declaration of pecuniary interest on May? No, sorry, that's just a.
Yeah. Yes, I declare my interest as a trustee of the Victoria Hall Trust, along with some of the members that I know are in the room. It's not a pecuniary interest, and I won't be taking part in the debate or voting this evening.
Okay. Is anybody going to?
Yeah, got
Councillor Mahmood.
yeah, same thing. Because
four of you, yes. Got it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Noted. So item 3. I'll remind members when we get to that item on the agenda as well. Item 3 then, do we agree the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of May 2023? I just said that because that means I wouldn't be mayor anymore, right? Right, a few announcements then to say. So I'm sure you've kept track of what we've been up to in the last 3 weeks via the Mayor's engagement sheet, which you'll notice probably now includes the ward location of events. I'm sort of semi-live on social media, but a few things coming up over the next few weeks, though I suspect I may be competing with an ultra hot destination called Uxbridge in the next few weeks as well, possibly. But anyway, let me start with an unfortunate sad announcement, which is Alderman Brian Callaghan passed away in June this year. He was a Labour alderman from 1974 to 1978. Then I need to talk about Armed Forces Reserves Day, which is reservists. It is on Monday, 19th of June. Reservists give up their spare time to serve in the reserve forces, balancing their civilian life with a military career to ensure that should their country require them, they'll be ready to serve. There is an annual Reserves Day, celebrate their contribution, and it's on the Wednesday, 21st of June, but I think we're having a celebration on the Monday, the 19th. There's Armed Forces Day itself, which is on the 24th, and I hope many of you will be able to join the Mayor for a ceremony on Town Hall steps, followed by refreshment at Ealing Ex-Servicemen's Club. So councillors look out for any invitation to this event shortly. On Thursday, I've got my formal visit to Shejo, and on Monday, and on Saturday, I think I'm joining Hamwell councillors for their carnival this year, which celebrates 125 years. On 22nd of June, I'm not going to say too much about this, but we do have Windrush Day. This marks 75 years since HMNT Windrush docked in Tilbury Docks in Essex, and its passengers and migrants from the Caribbean who disembarked to start a new life here. And there will be a celebration of contribution to Borough Slow's Kitchen on the day, but I think you may be hearing about more events later. Members will have noticed flying above the Town Hall is the progressive LGBTQIA+ flag, which we raised on the 1st of July, and I thank the council leader for making that happen. You would have seen an article around Ealing that the LGBT staff group have secured some places on the parade this year with the banner Progress with Unity and Diversity. So they do have places for up to 5 councillors initially who may wish to join. So, and I know some people often join with their own organisations, but anyone's interest, let me know and see what we can arrange. There will be a couple of additional events that will be attending during the course of the month as well. And then the day after Pride Parade, on the 2nd of July, I've got the annual Civic Mass at Ealing Abbey. And then finally, I just need to address some feedback I had in relation to some comments after they made at the full annual council meeting. So on Saturday, 27th May, I did secure a ticket to watch the EL final at Wembley, and Luton Town are now at Premier League. There you go. So that's over now. Now let's move on to item 5. Petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any petitions from members of the public. And then next item 6, which is any petitions members of the council.
Yeah, so myself, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Myself and Councillor Stabhead have a petition of 633 residents asking the council to reconsider plans to de-designate MOL 20 and MOL 22.
Thank you. Right, we're now on to item 7, well ahead of time here. Questions from members of the public, and I think we have one question.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to ask this question, which is, how can families placed in out-of-borough temporary accommodation, and I'm assuming that that definition was the strict 6 months definition rather than 6 years, how can families placed in out-of-borough temporary accommodation be denied a local connection, access to services such as Ealing Advice Service, Ealing Legal Advice, Green Homes Initiative, and insulation or hardship payments after paying council tax to Ealing Council for 6 years? Surely in that time, a local connection is established?
Thank you, Sian. So Councillor Mufus is going to respond to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sian, for your question, for coming here this evening. I'm Bassam Mahfouz. I'm the Cabinet Member for Safe and Genuinely Affordable Homes. And so I appreciate when somebody's moved out of the borough, it's something that we consider as sort of a last resort in terms of trying to make sure that we are supporting somebody in terms of having a roof over their head. And when you know, in terms of the definition of temporary, yes, that can very often be sometimes longer than we would like it to be, but that's where the market is at the moment in terms of what properties you like, in terms of being able to get access to properties to make sure that families, when they present to us, are housed in suitable accommodation. In terms of the specific question that you've asked about access to services locally, then I would really need to get into the nitty-gritty of sort of specific circumstances. So I'm more than happy to meet with yourself and anybody else that is in that situation. And if you've been told something by certain people, and you know, I really want to make sure that we are telling you the right thing, or whoever else it is telling you the right thing. And if they're not, then to make sure that it's corrected as soon as possible. So happy to, you know, I'll pop round after the question's asked, and then I'll give you my details and happy to meet with you one-to-one to make sure that's resolved. Okay.
I think I'm allowed. Just when you were answering that, this isn't my follow-up question. I just wanted to make sure that my follow-up question is relevant. Were you talking about Ealing Council moving families outside of the borough into kind of different boroughs for temporary accommodation, or were you actually talking about people who'd been placed in Ealing by other boroughs?
Sian, I think if you ask your supplementary question, and he can pick up that point.
Okay, fine. Yes, so as I think everybody would agree, 6 years is anything but temporary. Would it not be an idea, seeing as the law has not kept up with practice, to have a sort of dual councilship in the same way that other people have dual nationality, to have a dual councilship, so that people aren't excluded or thrown out of councils where they've lived for 6 years and felt very much at home. And this is coming to the fore very much with refugees and refugees at home who do have spokespeople. But of course, shelter is so overrun that if you're not a refugee, there's no advice available, especially not if you're banned from Ealing Advice Service, etc. So I just wondered if that would be something that could be considered. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Sian. I completely understand where you're coming from on it. And I think it will really depend on individual circumstances and also what sort of services you're trying to access, because if somebody has to be moved to another borough, then actually, you know, certain services, it will be most relevant for them to be in touch with that local council because they're providing those services. But if there are duties that we have or services that we have, we fund in Ealing that have a duty to you, then that's something I want to make sure that, you know, you're not missing out on. So as I say, it really depends on individual circumstances and what sort of services you're trying to tap into, but more than happy to go through that in a bit more detail and just make sure that we get to the bottom of it and correct anything that's not happening the right way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sian, and thank you, Councillor Mahfouz, for the response. So we now move on to item 8, which is questions from members of the council. So we normally allow up to 30 minutes for these questions before we move on to the next item of business. So the order of questions is, the first one I've got is Councillor Ty to Councillor Brett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to your place. And I'd just like to also welcome the Cabinet Member for Decent Living Incomes to her place and say how proud everyone is across North Hamwell about her appointment, and indeed Councillor Newstub as well. Could I ask, can the portfolio holder provide an update on the Council's delivery plan on increasing the number of living wage employers in Ealing, and a progress update on how we are delivering the real living wage?
Thank you, Councillor Tighe, for your question. I'm proud to announce that as of June 2023, there are at least 55 accredited living wage employers situated in Ealing. Our economic growth team have done an amazing job so far of working with teams across the council, from procurement to arts and culture, making important inroads in promoting and encouraging living wage accreditation. The work has been done The work that has been done so far by the team of officers at the council has been outstanding. We are continually communicating, engaging and networking with local businesses and find ourselves well on the way to hitting our ambitious target of 200 living wage employers in the next 3 years. That work with local businesses and stakeholders has been essential in our journey so far, and a big thank you must go out to the University of West London College, Ealing's 3 business improvement districts, the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation, the Creative Enterprise Zone business networks, and every single business and organisation and individual who has promoted or paid the living wage. The council has made sure to lead from the front. As of July 2022, a new council procurement policy was introduced, requiring all people employed on the new Ealing contracts to be paid the real living wage. I'd like to thank Councillor Martin for his role in chairing the High Street Task Force, which has helped deliver business support programmes with the aim of supporting businesses to pay the real living wage. The council has successfully accessed UK shared prosperity funding, helping to support small, medium-sized businesses in a wide variety of sectors, from manufacturing to construction to hospitality and media, as they continue their economic recovery. We've been enhancing the council's inward investment programme, Good for Ealing, with the goal of incentivising larger employers in the borough to act as exemplars and encourage their supply network of small SMEs and micro businesses to also be accredited with as living wage employers. I was pleased to welcome many of them to the council last week to celebrate our progress and continue conversations about the year to come. We have also launched the council's new Ealing Living Wage Incentives Package to encourage more businesses in the borough to become accredited employers. It was so great to meet local business leaders on the day and hear firsthand about the benefits their employees and businesses have felt by paying the living wage. When we pledged to deliver 10,000 jobs, we didn't pledge just to deliver any old jobs for our residents, but good, well-paid jobs, so that every resident in Ealing has the opportunity for a decent living income. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brett, for that response. So is there anybody from the Labour Group have a supplementary question?
I'd like to echo Councillor Tighe's comments and welcome the new Cabinet member to her place. The Office for Budget Responsibility says the UK has witnessed the worst fall in living standards since records began. Can the Cabinet member update us on how the Council is working to reduce the impact of the cost of living crisis on residents?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wesson. We know that many of our residents are struggling, and that's the same as the picture across the country. So the council has been working tirelessly to ensure that residents in Ealing are supported through the cost of living crisis. We continue to offer the council tax support for over 20,000 Ealing residents in our borough. We handed out over 75,000 vouchers last year as part of the household support scheme, helping to support the most vulnerable in our borough. I'm also proud to say that the council smashed its target for job delivery in 2022 and 23, with almost 3,000 jobs secured and created. And as I mentioned, we are continuing to do our part in addressing in-work poverty by growing the number of businesses in Ealing that pay the real living wage. As the Tory government in Westminster continues to drag its feet, while people in this country struggle with things as basic as putting a roof over their heads or food in their children's mouths, in Ealing, in London, Labour is stepping up and improving the help that our residents so desperately need. While Liz Truss turned the British economy upside down and inside out, seemingly overnight, Rishi Sunak seems to prefer to watch it slowly wither away. Regardless of who the Tories appoint to captain the ship, they seem incapable of steering it clear of stormy seas and almost hell-bent on seeing it capsize. The Tories have failed to deliver for Britain for too long. They can blame Brexit, they can blame COVID, they can blame the war in Ukraine as much as they like, but the reality is it's 13 years of mismanagement, 13 years of incompetence, and 13 years of a Conservative government, which has landed us here. That is why we need a Labour government and a government ready to support the most vulnerable and rebuild our economy. We have already proven in Ealing that Labour works, And come the next election, I know we'll be able to show the entire country what proper, responsible and compassionate government looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I was aware there was a little beep earlier on. I'm not sure what it was, if anyone else heard it. Next question, I've got Councillor Zizimos to Councillor Mason.
Please, could the portfolio holder outline what the outstanding stages for the completion of Ealing Broadway Crossrail Station works and when they will be complete, including any road enhancement features, giving details that include how access is going to be made for those with mobility issues?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in Councillor Costigan's absence, of course, our ability to carry out the planned works were largely impeded to the delays to the Crossrail programme. Before the delays were previously on track to be completed by December, thankfully, I've got some great news to announce that they will be done by the end of this month. And I'm sure everybody is going to be pleased. Not only have we managed now to open up what was formerly the Crossrail depot that for some time was repairing itself back into grassland. But of course, we've also come true on our promise to give back over to Haven Green what previously was not only a bus lay-by, but also a electricity substation. We're carefully considering where we're going to put additional new cycle stands on and around the station forecourt, and work's already started on sealing up the facade of the external bits of the building. We of course know that accessibility is a really important issue, and that's always been at the forefront of our minds in terms of the works that's happening there. The station is going to have step-free access and widened footpaths onto the public highway. Much of that is now complete. We've got a short amount to go. And of course, the pedestrian outside the station forecourt has already been widened. To help wheelchair users, we've of course secured the, if you like, the kiss and drop bays that allow people to be dropped off outside of the station. And of course, with the fantastic new lifts, they're able to get down to the platform edge.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Does anybody from the Liberal Democrat group have a supplementary question?
Does the Councillor Mason realise that only one of the drop-off points is actually there? The other one's a loading bay. It would be really good if we can get the second one, and it would be really good to have a timeline as well.
It's amazing.
By the end of the month, just like I said.
I think he's answered the question. Let's move on to next month. Right, third question is from Councillor Kamar, also to Councillor Mason.
Okay, so will the portfolio holder or Councillor Mason describe measures that are being taken to prevent users from carelessly leaving rented bikes on public pavements, thereby causing dangerous obstructions for pedestrians and wheelchair users?
Yeah, I know it's a vexed issue, and it's one that we frequently discuss on this side of the chamber. And I know that Councillor Donnelly's joined us on the front bench today, and he and I and Councillor Costigan regularly discuss this issue. You know, we appreciate the inconvenience it causes to people who park their rented bikes inappropriately. It's worth saying that the overwhelming majority of people who do use those bikes are sensible and considerate when they use what are still relatively new modes of transport. There are very few national laws that regulate how we deal with dockless cycle hire companies. But Ealing, as a council, we're working proactively with those who deliver them. So Dot, Lime and Tier. We've got non-contractual arrangements with them to ensure that if bikes are parked illegally and not parked in sort of the areas that are identified by the P symbol in the actual apps that you use, that actually we get notifications and we're able to tell the suppliers of the issue, and that equally is registered in their GPS settings too. That agreement effectively means that they have to move those bikes within 2 hours, and quite often that is absolutely the case. And if they don't do it, there's also another 12-hour penalty. It should mean that any bike that's left on public pavements and causes an obstruction to wheelchair users or pedestrians is moved, as I say, within that 2-hour period. If residents or visitors indeed to the borough do come across a bike that's causing obstruction, they can report it directly to Dot, Lime and Tier by using the respective apps or simply using the council's website. We're also currently reviewing the parking principles for the provision of e-bikes and e-scooters to improve safety and, of course, accessibility for pedestrians. The much coveted and longly awaited streets guide that we're about to produce and publish is going to give guidance both to our highways officers, but also to operators in terms of how we secure both on street and on carriageway parking. And of course, that hopefully will improve usability and accessibility of our streets to everybody.
Thank you. Does anybody from the Conservative group have a supplementary question?
Thank you. In the absence of Dotline not responding to emails or messages, will the council consider withdrawing licenses held by companies that fail to act to collect rental bikes causing obstruction?
I mean, if Councillor Kumar has particular, and I know she represents Ealing Broadway, and of course, Ealing Broadway is an area that has a significant footfall, both in terms of walking and cycling. As I say, if she does come across bikes that are inappropriately parked, she can, of course, always report it on the app. It will be dealt with. If she doesn't feel that it's happening sufficiently quickly enough, then, of course, be in touch with council officers, and I'm sure Councillor Costigan, who would be delighted to assist her in resolving the issue.
Thank you. Next question I've got, number 4, is Councillor Hamidi, who's asking this question to Councillor Newsted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder provide an update on the council's plans to mark the 75th anniversary of the HMT Empire Windrush and to celebrate the contribution of the Windrush generation and their descendants to this country?
Thank you so much, Councillor Hamidi, for the question. I couldn't agree more that it's important we mark the 75th anniversary of the arrival of HMT Empire Windrush in London. While it was by no means the first ship to bring migrants from the West Indies to Britain, the Windrush has become a symbolic of a generation of Caribbean and Commonwealth citizens answering a call for help, leaving their homes and families to contribute their skills, labour and talents to help rebuild a Britain ravaged by war. On the 22nd of June, up and down the UK, people will gather to celebrate the significant contributions of the Windrush generation and their descendants to British society, and to remember the injustices that they face and they still face. Ealing is no exception. There will be a variety of events and activities taking place across the borough, including education, arts, entertainment, music, fashion, poetry, film, and many more. Communities will come together to share their experiences, knowledge, and understanding this important moment in history. We've got a range of events planned. An evening of celebration on the day itself, 22nd of June at Pitshanger Manor and Gallery. The event will include the announcement of the winners of a local Windrush-themed school poetry competition, performance by the Southall's Freedom Worship Centre and West Ealing's Urban Fox Steel Band. The Windrush Day flag will be flown at Ealing, Greenford and Southall Town Halls. Paul Crooks is running a presentation and Q&A session for staff organised by the Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Staff Equality Group. And the leader will be hosting a tea for the West Windrush pioneers and others at the Town Hall. We're also, very excitingly, working on plans to host an end-of-season cricket match in the borough. I would like to wholeheartedly thank Councillor Anderson, Cabinet Aide for Windrush 75, for his work in putting all of this together, and importantly to the officer team for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else from the Labour group have a supplementary question?
Thank you, and may I welcome and congratulate Councillor Newsted on entering the Cabinet. Does she agree with me that the government has been disrespectful, ungrateful, and frankly negligent in its failure to implement the recommendations of the review that they commissioned from Wendy Williams back in 2020?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Thank you for your question, and thank you again for all the work you've done to champion this issue at and around Ealing in the last months. I couldn't really have put it better myself. The government has been disrespectful, ungrateful, frankly negligent by failing to implement the recommendations of the review they commissioned from Wendy Williams back in 2020. It is embarrassing and yet unsurprising that it's been over 3 years since that report was published in March 2020 and the government has failed to act. As I mentioned, the men and women who came to London on the Windrush were ordinary people who'd been invited to the UK from the Caribbean and who came in search of opportunity. In the 75 years since, those British Caribbean pioneers and their descendants have contributed hugely to Britain by working in the NHS, contributing to the economy, by starting businesses, bringing food and music to life in the British cultural scene, creating art and literature and so much more. But on arrival to the UK and through to the present day, they have faced prejudice and discrimination at the hands of landlords, the Home Office and employers. During the Windrush scandal, too many people had their rights violated through detention and even deportation from their home, which is, of course, the UK. And all of this because of the hostile environment the Conservatives decided to create in this country. There are a litany of injustices which have been perpetuated against members of the Windrush generation and their families. Residents who moved to the UK entirely legally, who've lived here for over 50 years, working and building their lives, have been detained, threatened with deportation, issued with fines for life-saving cancer treatment, lost their jobs and been made homeless. And it's over 5 years since the scandal broke, 3 years since the independent review, and still no apology from the Conservative government. And what in the world is taking so long? Councillor Mason has written an urgent letter to the Prime Minister and to the Home Secretary, not only to demonstrate our solidarity with the community of the Windrush generation and their descendants, but also to demand that the UK government commits to implementing all 30 recommendations submitted by Wendy Williams in March 2020 in full and as soon as possible. We're in the process of gathering support for this letter from across London, and we will publish it shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newsted. Next question, number 5, I've got from Councillor Malcolm to Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the large volume of residents and groups who've sent in their views on the local plan consultation and the controversy of removing the protected MOL and Greenbelt land, will the portfolio holder agree now to drop those elements of the plan?
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm, for your question. The local plan team have been working hard on synthesizing the almost 13,000 representations that we received via the local draft local plan consultation. And I look forward to being able to brief council on the results in the coming months. It's great that so many people in Ealing took the time to make a representation to the local plan team, and they did so on a wide variety of issues. We have made sure that public engagement has been at the heart of the local plan process, and I'm delighted to see how successful it's been. Despite this, every time I answer a question about the local plan, I am overwhelmed by an intense feeling of deja vu, like members of the opposition have us on a merry-go-round of local plan complaints. The opposition seem to continue to operate under the illusion that a productive use of their time in this chamber is to scaremonger about the local plan and its intentions. They want residents in Ealing to believe that the only intention we have when redesignating land in this borough is to tarmac over it all and destroy all the nature that the borough holds dear. In fact, protection and enhancement of our high quality green space is one of this administration's guiding principles when it comes to placemaking. Our commitment to open 10 new parks over the course of our term in office sits at the heart of this. I have explained the logic behind the proposed changes to members of the opposition and in person with Councillor Malcolm. But what it feels like is that you explained it 1,000 times, and to be quite honest, I'm at a point where I'm not sure they want to understand. Allow me to explain it again once more, Councillor Malcolm, publicly, so that you can watch it on YouTube when you misunderstand what I've said. The reason that we are proposing a redesignation of certain plots of metropolitan open land and greenbelt in the borough is simply to ensure that they have the correct designations. Therefore, we are closing the loopholes which are currently open to exploitation by speculative investors and developers. In fact, in Perival, there's land which is people's back gardens still designated as MOL, and I'm sure you wouldn't want those residents not to plant in their back gardens because it's MOL. All the metropolitan open land sites which are earmarked for redesignation fit the definition of either public open space or community open space much more closely than they fit the metropolitan open land definition. This incorrect designation leaves the sites more open to development and then redesignation. Ensuring that sites are assigned the correct designation affords them effective and robust protection against future development.
Do you want to wind up,
Protections which
please?
would stand up to scrutiny and testing better than the current situation. Ealing has a wealth of well-used and well-loved green spaces for which, for example, are a valuable resource that those without private gardens can take advantage of when they wish to be closer to nature. We are all even less likely to take that for granted in the post-pandemic COVID stage before COVID.
Thank you, thank you. That's-
A revised draft of the local
Thank
plan.
you, Mr. Councilman. No,
Sorry, last sentence, last couple. A revised draft of the local plan will be prepared in due course and will be subject to further round of public and stakeholder consultation. I look forward to continuing to protect green and open space in the borough. Thank you. And please watch YouTube again, Councillor Malcolm.
Don't want to hear the answers. Okay, all right. I dread asking this question now. Does anybody from Lib Dem Group have a supplementary question?
I do. Mine will be rather shorter. Does the portfolio holder agree with the Mayor of London, who wrote in respect of green belts and MOLs that neither would be justified nor effective in terms of the changes that Ealing are proposing? We strongly advise the London Borough of Ealing not to proceed with the plans of the de-designation. That's what the Mayor of London said. So I ask again, Councillor Manro, given those comments and the many others that you've said have given views in the consultation, will you as the portfolio holder agree to drop those elements of the local plan?
Councillor Malcolm, if we agreed to everything everybody said, we'd never do anything. The reality is we've gone to consultation on our draft plan. We've got the responses back, 13,000 of them. We will go through them and then we will come out with a Regulation 19 local plan where you will see what we've taken into consideration. But I am not going to just give unilateral announcements on certain bits of the local plan. We will do it in a controlled way, and we will take every single consultation that we've received into account before we publish the Regulation 19 local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've got two more questions in the next 5 minutes. So next question, I've got Councillor Summers to Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can a portfolio holder provide an update on the council's provision of supported accommodation for some of our most vulnerable residents in the last year?
Thank you very much, Councillor Summers, for the question. The council has been working tirelessly over the last year to support the most vulnerable residents with their housing needs. And I pay tribute to Councillor Lauren Wall for her leading that portfolio for most of that time. So thank you, Lauren, for all of your work in that area. Having recently taken over the portfolio, I am so impressed by all of the work that officers put in over the past 12 months to help ensure that residents who need our help receive it. We continue our outstanding work on homelessness prevention with our early intervention methods, helping over 1,600 people, preventing them from becoming homeless, and in many cases, finding them a new place to call home. Our work with partners has also been essential for supporting our residents who are experiencing homelessness. Working with St Mungo's, the council has helped provide 120 beds for those who are street homeless in our borough, helping provide our most vulnerable residents with an opportunity to rebuild their lives. The council is currently accommodating 28 rough sleepers as of June this year, and is working hard to ensure that those people can have a fresh start in their lives. And as we will hear later on this evening, the council is also committed to ensuring that the borough is a place where those fleeing war and persecution can find safety and security. Over the last year, I'm proud to say that the council has provided accommodation for 464 refugees under the Homes for Ukraine programme, 80 through the Afghan resettlement scheme, with an additional 14 arriving just this month, and 62 within the UK resettlement scheme, the majority of whom have come from Syria. That's over 600 people to whom Ealing has provided safe refuge to from conflicts around the globe. I'm proud of all the amazing work that Council has done over the past year to help provide for our most vulnerable residents and look forward, Mr. Mayor, to continuing all of that hard work for years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Does anybody else from the Labour Group have a supplementary question? Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder provide an update on how the council is provisioning homes for the borough's more vulnerable residents, please?
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. Indeed, we continue our house building programme, working with our partners to deliver genuinely affordable homes for our residents. We're providing homes for our elderly residents on the Stane Road estate in Acton, supported accommodation that will allow those staying there to remain independent. We continue our important work on homelessness. As I've just said, over 1,600 cases of homelessness prevented. Continuing our great work on homelessness prevention, and we will continue to work with partners to deliver supported accommodation for those sleeping on the street. I'd also like to thank Councillor Munro for his work on the Council's new land and property strategy, which will allow us to move swiftly on acquiring assets that could help our most vulnerable residents, whether it's acquiring space that could be used to provide genuinely affordable homes or temporary accommodation to even larger properties that could be used to house those in our care system. All this work is being delivered despite the current economic pressures and difficulties that we face. Rents in the private sector are continuing to absolutely skyrocket as supply remains stagnant. In Greenford alone, we saw increases in rent of 83% since 2018. Owning your own home remains nothing but a pure dream for most, and the number of people who have been driven to homelessness and rough sleeping is sadly on the rise under this government. Michael Gove even admitted that the current UK housing model is broken. Well, I think that's pretty obvious who broke it. We don't even need to see the WhatsApp chats to find that one out, do we? Look, we've had 15 housing ministers since 2010, 9 who couldn't last 12 months in the job, 6 in the last year. The seemingly never-ending churn of ministers makes the Watford job look like it's stable, long-term employment. We have a government that seems to exist in a perpetual crisis of management. It's no wonder that the government hasn't once been able to hit its yearly targets for new home building. All of the hard work we do in Ealing can only help so many people up and down the UK. People up and down the UK are currently facing cost of living pressures, whether it's rising mortgages or rising rents. Everyone's currently suffering because of this incompetent Tory government and its self-inflicted axe wound of a housing crisis that they continue to treat with sticking plasters. And now, how have we ended up in this situation? Well, it's pretty obvious. 13 years of Tory inaction and failure, a government that spent over a decade jumping from one scandal to the next and forgetting the one thing that they're actually there to do is to govern. That's why Labour in Ealing and in London are continuing to deliver genuinely affordable homes that our residents need, not only need, but deserve, working harder than ever to ensure that the residents of Ealing can have somewhere safe, can have somewhere secure and somewhere affordable that they can call home. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. You know, I so wanted to respond to your Watford jive there, you know, so anyway, one more question. I can't be neutral to football with an orange tie on, so right, one last question. So we'll take last question as Councillor Mohammed to Councillor Nand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can portfolio holder provide an update on council progress on tackling male violence against women and girls?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mohammed, for your question. We have all seen the toll that misogyny and male violence against women and girls has on our residents and, of course, our communities. Across the UK, far too many women and girls feel unsafe going about their daily lives. Almost a quarter of women in the UK report having been a victim of sexual assault, or 70% of women have experienced some form of sexual harassment. And once every 3 days, a woman in the UK will be murdered by a man. Mr. Mayor, in February of this year, the council published a new male violence against women and girls strategy. This strategy was co-created through the council's Safer Ealing for Women listening exercise, in which over 3,000 women and girls from Ealing took part through a mixture of in-person focus groups and online collaboration, along with the input from partners from across Safer Ealing Partnership. Mr. Mayor, the strategy focuses on 4 key priorities that will enable us to tackle the scourge of MWOG. We will provide better education to prevent toxic behaviours in men and young boys. We will ensure that everyone in our borough who suffers from domestic violence can access high quality support, work with communities to create a culture where everyone knows that they can do to challenge MWOG. And we will work with key partners, including the Metropolitan Police, to ensure that perpetrators are held to account. We have worked with women and girls across the borough to populate an interactive map to identify areas where they do not feel safe, with over 2,000 being dropped during the Safe Ealing for Women's exercise. This shows us the scale of the problem in our borough and the challenge on our hands to make things better. For several years, Mr. Mayor, Ealing has sought to be a leader on gender inequality and MWOG-related issues, whether this be leading the UK to introduce the first safe zone around the Mattock Lane abortion clinic, or work taking forward in the Safer Ealing for Women approach in open and transparent and community-led way. Mr. Mayor, moving forward, and as I take on this new portfolio and all of its opportunities and challenges, I can assure members who will continue to look to lead in this space and make Ealing a truly equitable and safe place for women and girls.
Thank you, Councillor Ann. One final question from anybody from the Labour Group, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With convictions for rape and other serious offences falling as a result of the Conservative government's failure to properly fund the police and court system, can the portfolio holder please update us on the wider steps that the council is taking to deliver a safer Ealing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Niger, for your supplementary question. It is nothing short of a national scandal that serious offences are going unpunished as a direct result of this. The government undermining and underfunding of the courts and the police over the last 13 years, where the government has failed to protect residents, particularly women and girls, from crime, Ealing is acting. To follow on the original question on the MWOG, these are some of the specific measures that we have taken. Education workshops are being delivered in Ealing schools to challenge misogyny at any very young, earlier age, and look forward to attending one later this month in Southall. We have improved the multi-agency approach to providing support to survivors of domestic abuse. We've improved training of council staff on identifying and responding to predatory behaviours in public spaces. And as part of our wider focus on tackling crime, I will also be confirming at Cabinet tomorrow that we have agreed to extend the arrangement to have 5 locally funded police officers patrolling in Ealing, making our streets safer. We have also installed 18 CCTV cameras as part of the response to the Safer Women in Ealing consultation that will help us make some of these areas identified on the interactive map safer. But of all of our efforts, it is clear that until we have a local government that treats local government as a true partner in combating crime. Mr. Mayor, a Labour government that will once again be tough on crime and tough on the course of crime, that our efforts will be hamstrung by an out of touch, out of time Conservative government. I'd also like to take the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to thank my predecessor, Councillor Aisha Raza, who's done a lot of work around the strategy, and thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Land. Just as an aside, because I remembered it's because of where I work, because it's been almost a year since Zara Alina died in Ilford, which made headlines last year as well, of course. But thank you, members, for that wide range of questions to all of you, and let's hope the same next time. So now we get on to the fun bits. Opposition group motion for debate. So starting point, as a reminder, a number of members of the Victoria Hall Trust Committee present tonight have declared an interest who won't be taking part in the debate or the vote. And I'll just clarify, are you staying in the room while we have debate? Yes, okay. All right, therefore I shall call on Councillor Ball to move the motion first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the Cabinet are forever lecturing us about the dire straits of the council's finances. So let's think about what £3 million could do. That could pay for free school meals for all of the borough school children across the summer holidays, or it could pay to plant 12,000 trees in our streets, or it could pay to rent a room for every single person sleeping rough on Ealing streets for a year. But instead, Ealing has wasted nearly £3 million and counting on its doomed scheme to turn this town hall into a hotel, including the costs of fighting residents in court who are striving to retain Victoria Hall as an available and affordable venue for local community groups and residents, rather than turning it into a hotel ballroom available only to the elite. In fact, the true cost to council funds so far is even higher, as these figures include neither the lost revenue due to Victoria Hall and other town hall rooms not being available for booking for big chunks of the last few years, far beyond closures required for COVID, nor the £350,000 indemnity that this administration foolishly committed to paying Masscraft if and when the deal finally falls through. The Victoria Hall was built using funds raised by public subscription, the Victorian form of crowdfunding, and has been the historic scene of thousands of our borough's most salient political and cultural meetings, concerts and exams, not to mention countless weddings. It was not the council's to dispose of in the first place, and so the hotel scheme was always built on sand. We await the court judgment on this point. But on top of that, the financial realities of development have moved on hugely since the scheme was agreed in 2018 due to Brexit, COVID and the inflation caused by Liz Truss. To give credit to the leader of the council, I think he's on his phone at the moment. Good. He realised that the Percival House scheme did not stack up and he took the decision to scrap it. So will he tonight stand up and make the same announcement with respect to the town hall scheme? There would be no shame for Councillor Mason in saying tonight that the town hall hotel scheme is no longer on the table and committing to work with local residents rather than battling against them to deliver a new use for the architectural jewel in Ealing's crown. So, Mr. Mayor, I beg to move the motion in my name, and I challenge Councillor Mason and Councillor Manroe to stop wasting money, to put aside any notion of procedural tricks tonight, and to scrap this ill-conceived scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. You going to second it?
Yes, I will be seconding Councillor Ball's motion. One of the things that I love as a councillor is seeing the wide array of community activities that take place across Ealing. But to do this, residents and groups need community centres and facilities to meet each other and engage. Victoria Hall is one of those very sites. It's got great local significance around the borough, and many community assets have disappeared over the past 10 or more years. With 130 years ago, when the Victoria Hall was created, it was built to be enjoyed by everyone, not just for now, but in the future. This should not be sold off to a hotel with limited access for people. As Councillor Ball has said, Victoria Hall is one of those places in the centre of the borough that could potentially use for different range of community activities at a reasonable price. For the council to be engaged in a legal battle with residents often leads to failure and a large financial bill. Councillor Ball has mentioned many of the ways the council could better use £3 million on a range of different schemes to help many vulnerable people around the borough. So this administration, first of all, needs to apologise for the waste that it's caused. £3 million is a huge sum. It needs to apologise for that. It is very clear what the Liberal Democrat motion is about and what needs to be done. That is cancel this town hall scheme and make sure that any future scheme could be community-led rather than developer-led. This should be a genuinely independent Victoria Hall, and we need to involve our residents and not lock horns with residents.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council first entered into a contract with Mastercraft in 2016, quite a long time ago, to carry out the project for Ealing Town Hall, and an agreement for lease was completed in 2019. Those arrangements are still stand. I would like to take the opportunity to thank our partners Mastercraft for the work they have done over the past 7 years, despite the delays that the project has experienced thus far. I would also like to say in response to this motion that the vast majority of the money that has been spent so far on the Town Hall project, as the opposition well know from the answer to the written questions they submitted back in April, has been on the relocation of services like the CCTV control room and electoral services. These relocations serve a wider business need for the council, and they have benefited and will continue to benefit the council regardless of the Town Hall project. As the opposition also know, there's a legal challenge which has to be concluded regarding this project. Mr. Mayor, I would like to assure the opposition and residents that Ealing Town Hall will remain an important part of civic life in our borough, regardless of the outcome of the outstanding legal challenge, both in the new and improved civic wing, but also the continued guarantee of community use of key parts of the Town Hall, including the Victoria Hall. However, because of the outstanding legal challenge, it would not be appropriate for any member of the Cabinet, members of the Planning Committee, or members of the Victoria Hall Trust Committee that are currently present to either speak on the motion or for the council to vote on it. Mr. Mayor, in accordance with Rule 14.12 of the Council and Committee Procedure Rules, I'd like to move a closure motion that we proceed to next business.
Hang on. First of all, is it seconded? Okay. Is there no plan to speak on that? No.
So Mayor, understanding orders, you can only move that motion without comment. You can't proceed it with a speech. You're not allowed to understanding orders 14.12 is the standing order if you'd like to check. Member is allowed to move the procedural motion moving to next business or putting it to the vote only without comment. Councillor Munro has made a speech and then moved the motion, which is not allowed under standing order 14.12.
On Councillor Mason. Okay.
The closure motion allows any member to move the closure of a speech, a closure motion, which Councillor Munro has done. It's been duly proposed and duly seconded. I suggest that we move to the vote on the closure motion.
No, sorry.
A member may move without comment at the conclusion.
Chair, this is not an order. This is not an order.
No, I'm going to rule on this.
Sorry,
Councillor, I'm going to rule on this, please. So it has been moved, that closing motion, and I am having to take a view on this one as to whether we move to the vote or not. Now, I think Lib Dems, you did get a right reply to this motion. If I agree, goes to the vote. So I'm sort of sorry, I'm reading my notes here slightly as well, I'm thinking about the next bit. Yeah, so just to clarify, so I am going to allow a vote on the closure motion. I think Lib Dems, you have expressed your political viewpoint on this one, but the explanation has been given by the Cabinet member on this one, given the legal challenges and the fact that Councillor Munro has explained that Cabinet members, and we've got friends of Victoria Hall Trust or Victoria Trust people tonight, and therefore I'm going to move to the vote on the closure motion. But you, as Lib Dems, do have a right to apply on this one. To the closure motion.
Fine. Yes. So the argument for the closure motion is not at all compelling. quite apart from the procedural point that Councillor Young made, well, obviously I respect your decision, but it does sound like the strict text of the standing orders means that it can't be added tacked on to the end of a speech. But putting that to one side, how the council spends its money on a key scheme like this is something which the council can validly debate. And I think we've had our say, but I think it would be healthy for democracy for all parties to be able to have their say on this issue. So we will be voting against the closure motion, Mr. Mayor.
Go to the vote then on this one. Okay, all right. All those in favour. Sorry, it's not yellow flavoured, is it? Orange. If all those in favour of the closure motion, put your hands up. Okay, all those against. Okay, and any abstentions? No. The closure motion therefore has been carried, and therefore we're going to move on to the next order of business. It's now 8 o'clock. You're well ahead of time. So there is the next item is item 10, which is the majority on page 9, the majority group motion for debate, and that's I call on Councillor Newsome to move the motion for debate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say that I'm delighted to be here promoting this motion. However, it can only really be a terrible, terrible shame on all of us that I find myself here introducing a motion intended as a counterweight to this cruel, inhumane and chaotic government, a bunk, corrupt and broken government that is prepared to sink to any level to cling onto power. A government that vilifies and demonizes the most vulnerable to serve its own end. A government that fails over and over in its duties under international law and even under the most basic standards of human values. A government that claims its illegal migration bill is necessary to save lives in the Channel with no evidence at all that it will achieve it. A government that wants to give itself the power to declare someone's right to asylum inadmissible, to send people back to their country of origin while taking no account at all of the risks they may face when they return. A government that's been recently criticised by the GCHR, which by the way has a Conservative majority, which said in essence this bill repeals for the vast majority of refugees the right to asylum, which underpins the whole premise of the Refugee Convention, to which the UK is bound by a matter of international law. The illegal migration bill means that anyone who is not lucky enough to come through safe routes, regardless of their need and regardless of the trauma and violence they have experienced or may face on their return, will be deported. So what of those that do arrive by these so-called safe routes? All but very few safe routes to the UK are closed. The few that remain are chaotically and inhumanely managed. The latest events in Sudan and Afghanistan show that the government is unable to protect even British citizens or those who have worked for us, protected us. And what welcome did they get from the Home Office? The reality is none. The reality is that the most vulnerable are then recruited at the time of their greatest need to the cause of the government's sickening and nightmarish hostile environments, deliberately marginalised, deliberately other, deliberately made targets of a vicious far-right ideology that this government is so willing to exploit. And behind these headlines are thousands of families, children who have the right to protection, to have the opportunity to rebuild their lives, to recover from the trauma of displacement, the trauma of abuse, the trauma of war. And instead they find themselves crammed into unsafe hotels, reception centres, barracks, and now barges with no prospect of a home to settle, to work, to contribute, to become part of their communities, facing enforced poverty and homelessness, deliberately made targets of violence and exclusion. As Refugee Council head Emma Solomon said recently, is cruelty by design. And let me say that again, cruelty by design. How did we lose our humanity, our empathy, our willingness to help those in greatest need? I spoke on Windrush earlier. The Windrush scandal was created because of the Tory government's obsession with creating a hostile environment. to play to the nasty, nasty, nasty parts of their own party, which used to occupy the fringes, but now occupy the Home Office. To quote Emma Solomon again, make no mistake, this is a strategic choice, a decision to treat those in fear of their lives with contempt. I am proud to be a member of a Labour-led administration here in Ealing. We believe that we must support those facing persecution and war, and will do everything we can to do so. We recognise that the government are creating an impending homelessness crisis in Ealing. We believe that those seeking safety should be housed as our neighbours and be part of our communities. We will welcome refugees with dignity, empathy, kindness and respect, and we commit to campaigning against refugee laws and to working with our community partners to help promote the welfare and inclusion of people fleeing persecution. I have the greatest honour of leading on our commitment to become a borough of sanctuary, which will show that clearly that we welcome and value the contributions of those who seek sanctuary here and make their home here. We know that the people of Ealing are compassionate and humane, and we proudly reject and challenge the anti-refugee narrative perpetuated by this Conservative government.
Thank you.
I've got one more last thing I'd love to say. Excuse me, Mayor, if I may. I commend you to the stories that you will hear from colleagues tonight, who we are fortunate enough made their home here in Ealing. And I condemn the appalling and disgraceful travesty of the anti-refugee laws, rooted in bigotry, chaos, and the desperate death throes of a long, morally defunct government. Thank you, Mayor, for the extension.
You can thank you an extension. I think you just took it. Councillor Mace.
I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
I think I've got Councillor Conti going to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I stand to move the Conservative amendment. The UK has a proud history of embracing and providing sanctuary to individuals who seek sanctuary from war and persecution. In recent years, that has been no different, with almost 500,000 people since 2015 having resettled in the UK from Afghanistan, Hong Kong, Syria, Ukraine, and the Resettled Family Scheme for individuals who already have refugee status in the UK. And these schemes continue, with plans to settle 20,000 people from Afghanistan over the next few years. However, the situation in the Channel can't continue. It can't continue because it's a perilous crossing in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes where people are losing their lives. It can't continue because organised criminal gangs are exploiting the most vulnerable people and sending them out to sea on dinghies. It can't continue because, as the Prime Minister said on the 7th of March, that in order to, by controlling the situation in the Channel, be able to provide further safe and legal means for people to come to the UK. The National Border Bill, which includes the Rwanda scheme, a scheme which was upheld by the UK High Court in December, is a last resort to stop the business model that funds criminal gangs exploiting people. One of the criticisms of this scheme is that it will not act as a deterrent. Last year, 20% of people crossing the Channel came from Albania. A return scheme with Albania was agreed last year, and so far this year, there's been a 90% reduction in people coming from Albania, a country that's on the cusp of joining the European Union. A compassionate approach also requires that we get people out of hotel accommodation and their claims dealt with quickly. And we need to bear down on the backlog as soon as possible. We welcome the council's work with local organisations and people with lived experience of the asylum system in order to help them as they move into the borough. So, Mr. Mayor, we continue to support schemes that enable people to move to the UK through legal means, but we cannot continue to see people dying in the Channel.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Conti. I've next got Councillor Gallant. You are.
Yes, I second the amendment and I'll reserve my right to speak later if that's okay. Thank you.
Next up, I've got Councillor Hashani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I take this opportunity to congratulate you as the Actonian First Citizen. You're a committed anti-racist and ally of the refugee community in Acton and beyond, as demonstrated by your choice of charity for this mayoral year. So thank you. I'm also grateful this motion comes from our newly appointed cabinet member, Councillor Newstub. Before I start my speech, could I just respond to Councillor Conti, who doesn't provide any suggestion of a safe route to get to the UK? if you're a refugee, right? A few weeks ago, I was proud to represent Ealing Labour at the Actonian Club Football Welcomes Tournament, which is sponsored annually by Amnesty UK and the Felix Project. The tournament brought together refugees from across the borough for a chance to unite around the love of the sport. I was able actually to tell my own story of how back in 1999, Liverpool Football Club hosted all the new refugees where I was at to see the grounds and meet the players. Though my brothers would end up becoming diehard Manchester United fans in the end, I don't know. Football, though, is still playing its part in supporting refugee communities in the UK, but that's where the similarities end, because today refugees in the UK are facing a hostile government with hostile policies. We're seeing a UK asylum system disintegrating into local, national and international farce, quite frankly. At the end of December, nearly 170,000 people were waiting an asylum decision, many of these overwhelming majority awaiting an initial application. And this has doubled from 2020 to 2022. The backlog is at record levels. The Prime Minister accepts this, and it's leaving thousands and thousands of people in limbo with no recourse to public funds, unable to get a job, no prospect of being able to begin their lives with dignity and respect that we all believe everybody should have. At the football tournament, I spoke with a group of refugees, mostly from Afghanistan and Iran, and not Albania. They are residents of the Stay Club in Acton, and they've been in limbo, and I've not heard from the Home Office in over 2 years. Not a single letter has come through the door about their applications. They depend on £45 a week of assistance, no adjustments for inflation, of course. And thanks to the work of local organisations, charities and the local council, they do feel support of the community behind them. But what of this technocratic weight? What impact is this having on their mental health or their long-term futures? Mr. Mayor, the government purports to talk big on mental health, but not for refugees. It talks big on cost of living, but not for refugees on £45 a week. It talks about jobs and education, but not for refugees who aren't allowed to take up a job and feed their families. It's really an appalling state, which brings to question the UK system as a whole and leaves me to wonder, is it by chaos or design? Which is what Mr. Solomon said himself. Do people in power really want to clear the backlog? Or are they too happy to let some of our most vulnerable residents suffer? Perhaps this is another deterrent, along with the other heinous deterrents, such as the new policy of making asylum seekers inadmissible because they desperately get on a boat to arrive to this country for safety, or the incomprehensible Rwanda policy. I'll leave it at that, but of course I support the majority motion and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Next, I've got Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me this opportunity to speak. It's very close to my heart. As many of my colleagues know, my family came as refugees from Uganda in 1972. We were well settled there. My father was born there. My grandfather was in Kenya. We had no intention of leaving when there was a military coup from Idi Amin. And then one day he seemed to have a dream, he said, and you have 90 days to leave the country. As soon as he announced 90 days, all the banks were closed and there was no more purchases of anything because he said all of our stuff belonged to them. We arrived in this country on a cold October day in Gatwick Airport. And my father was only allowed to bring £50 with him. Me, my father, my mother, and my 5 siblings, so 6 of us in the family, arrived at Gatwick. And the reception we got was brilliant. People looked after us and helped us. But the point is, what the problems we faced in Uganda, as we were going from Jinja to the airport, there were many military checkpoints, and you will see with all the soldiers there. My father had to pay a bribe because one of the soldiers wanted to keep my sister as his wife. And that's the kind of thing people flee from when they have to leave their countries. It is really, really important. We understand people are forced to leave, and that's why they need a legal way to get into this country. The people going across the channel have no other choice. They've got nowhere else to go. They've got family and friends in this country, and they have no legal way to apply anywhere. You could easily open up a center in France and let people apply legally, but you choose not to because you have this secret hatred, I think, of immigrants. Because I found out the history of Uganda. I found out the history. I'm sorry, I'll explain it to you. Can I explain it to you? And can I, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sorry, councillor, let him finish his speech.
Let me just explain it to you. When I grew up in this country, growing up, I found out the history. Before we were accepted in this country, the Tory government was looking for an island in the West Indies to send us to and not take us in. When they couldn't find anybody, they were forced to take us. And you remember Leicester, don't you not? All the adverts that came in our local papers saying, don't come to Leicester. It's a really difficult thing, but we just celebrated 50 years of Ugandan Asians in this country and the contribution they made, and you all celebrated. But the reality of the history is there's always this understated issue around not wanting immigrants to come to this country, and it's always there, and it's more in the Tory party than elsewhere. And I would say that because, and I can say that because my elder brother and my younger nephew. Okay, I'll wrap it up. Sorry, I had to change my speech, but I really feel very, very strongly that we should be a sanctuary and we should help people. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's going to get heated, but Councillor Mahfouz, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think Councillor Manro, well done to you for sharing your story. And for me, and as for so many people in this room, this motion isn't just a motion, it's personal. You see, I was born in Beirut, a city previously known as the Paris of the Middle East, but became a synonym for brutal civil war, a city divided, a green line that turned former friends into foes, bullet-ridden and crumbling buildings where the rich used to wine and dine, roads full of checkpoints, where mispronouncing a name could be the difference between life or death, where refugee camps themselves became sites of massacres instead of protection. My home village is in the south of Lebanon, later to be occupied by the Israelis, in an area that continues to be a tinderbox, where to this day, the sight of blue berets of the UN peacekeeping forces is all too common. I'm lucky I can go back, but I was talking to a Syrian refugee recently who, of course, with her status, couldn't return. And that meant that her sister, dying of cancer, she could not return to give one last hug or to say one last time that she loved her. And I'll never forget, as a 15-year-old boy, watching broken and burnt bodies of 100 plus women and children being carried out of a UN erected tent where they were supposed to be protected. Instead, it was their final resting place. Mr. Mayor, alongside these lasting images are the ones that I saw in Auschwitz, where I won't say any more, but we know humanity allowed itself to reach such horrifying lows. And that's why, Mr. Mayor, words matter. Tolerance matters. Seeking understanding matters. Sadly, this government has learned little from the last century with their intolerant, dehumanizing and demonizing approach for refugees, where families are criminalized and blamed for fleeing war and persecution through the only means available to them. People do not choose to be a refugee. In fact, over 50 million people around the world are refugees in their own countries. And most who do manage to get out of their own country only get as far as the next country, staying in UNHCR tents and relying on NGOs for support. Chad, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Turkey all host far more refugees than we even come close to. So whether the people are from Ukraine, Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, or Sudan, we should be treating those seeking sanctuary in our borough with respect, with dignity, and an appreciation of what they have been through and the trauma that they have faced. We should do so with tolerance, seeking understanding and with open hearts. Mr. Mayor, I ask everyone to look above your head. This borough was built on a motto, progress with unity. My mother came here with no English, but became an ESOL teacher to new arrivals and refugees in our borough. Refugees may have come here having lost their homes, their jobs, sometimes even their families, but they still have their experiences and skills. They still have opinions, memories, dreams, loves, and they still have their determination to build a good life. And with a little help from us, embodying the words of that motto, they can do more than survive in our community. Mr. Mayor, in our borough sanctuary, they will thrive.
Right, thank you. Now, I know a number of speakers are going over and I feel terrible to have to cut you off, to be honest, but I have to be strict with the time to get everybody in on this motion. So next, I've got Councillor Busuttil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's great we're having this debate in this chamber tonight, Mr. Mayor. So much of the public and political debate on migration in recent years has been driven by fear linked to change and loss of control. Many people are concerned that their communities and local services risk being overwhelmed. Yes, there's real pressure on housing, schools and GP surgeries in London, but refugees are not the cause of these problems. The way refugees and asylum seekers are portrayed, anyone would think that an armada is coming to take over this country. Furthermore, immigration in general comes eighth in the issues that concern voters the most. The numbers of asylum seekers have dropped in the past couple of decades. Roughly about 50,000 applications were made in 2021, about 85,000 in 2002, and now takes longer to process than ever before. Turkey, on the other hand, took in 3 million refugees since 2011. Recognition of human dignity is the first principle which must underpin an asylum policy. A hostile environment is an immoral environment. Each human being has worth regardless of their background. A compassionate asylum system is one that sees the faces of those in need and listens to their voices. A compassionate system does not mean borders, but a readiness to welcome those in genuine need. A compassionate policy is one that has confidence to reject the negativity, for those that seek asylum should be treated as liars, scroungers, or less than human. When we fail to challenge the harmful rhetoric that refugees are the cause of this country's ills, that they should be treated as problems and not people, we deny the dignity of our fellow human beings. The right to protect refugees and seek asylum has been politically degraded in this country when it should be a source of pride. The government has said the Rwanda policy aims to deter people arriving the UK through illegal, dangerous or unnecessary methods. There is little or no evidence that this deterrence or hostile environment works. The government's own impact assessments say so, as well as the overcrowded immigration centres and hotel accommodation, keep migrants separate from the rest of the community. This segregation only feeds to the concerns about the lack of control. It fails to treat asylum seekers and refugees as neighbours or citizens in waiting. We miss out on the gifts that they will bring and want to contribute. We have seen in the Ukraine scheme that the asylum seekers and refugees live within existing communities. Such communities receive prompt and adequate government support, which is cheaper than exporting our responsibilities.
Wind it up.
Okay, my last point. The motion comes a week before Cornwall's first ever refugee resettlement conference, Compassion into Action, which brings together leaders, senior managers, local refugee support networks and school leaders to discuss, responses to the challenge of integrating refugees, the benefits of both residents and arrivals.
Is that it? I need to end. Come on.
Just
No, no, no,
once?
no, 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 no. I think that's it.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So next up, I got Councillor Blacklini.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to share with you a story of courage, resilience, and freedom. A story that is personal to me, but echoes the experiences of countless refugees around the world. In 1990, amidst the chaos of the Lebanese civil war, my husband, then aged 19, embarked on a journey in search of safety and a chance of a better life. He arrived in London seeking asylum and was offered the opportunity to integrate and thrive. As a child, I too, like Bassam, didn't experience the typical joys and comforts that many children take for granted. Instead, I lived in a shelter and witnessed the horrors of many wars that scarred my childhood and shattered my innocent dreams. Arriving to Ealing in 2001, I was welcomed with open arms and was given a chance to further my education with lots of opportunities I could only dream of as a child. Today, 33 years later, my husband and I have a beautiful family and have been living in Ealing for over 2 decades, and I even became the first ever Lebanese female councillor in Ealing Council. For us, Ealing is not only a collection of neighborhoods, it's a borough of sanctuary and our only home where our kids were born and raised, went to school and university. Ealing is our children's safe haven and the place where they can thrive and achieve a much better start of life. Through my story, I hope to shed a light on the importance of giving refugees a chance and why they deserve a life filled with hope, compassion, and opportunity. Just like anyone else, they have hopes, aspirations, and a lot of potential to contribute to communities they become part of. Mr. Mayor, in a world where divisions and barriers can sometimes overshadow our shared humanity, it is heartening to see Ealing Labour Administration embracing and recognizing the values of people, upholding the principles of openness, equality, and social justice, which makes Ealing a borough of sanctuary. Mr. Mayor, I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Nand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak in this debate. Mr. Mayor, this debate on becoming a borough sanctuary goes to the very heart of what we want to be as a council. And in the administration, we often talk about our drive to become a more open, transparent, and inclusive council. And the way that we treat people seeking safety in our borough goes to the core of these commitments. I have been inspired to see how many Ealing residents have opened their homes and their hearts to refugees from all over the world. It's been so wonderful to see how they've been enriching our communities, and I have been so proud of the welcome that they have received from the people across Ealing. Mr. Mayor, our response to the refugee crisis over the last decade should be a source of pride for all of us in Ealing and indeed for councils across London and the country. It has been local government and councils like Ealing who did the heavy lifting on the Homes for Ukraine mission, finding and supporting host families. It is the local government who have had to find and finance additional school places and to meet needs. It is the local government who have done all that we can to make sure that wherever a person is coming from, whatever their story, that their needs are met and they are safe, secure, and know that they are valued. Yet, Mr. Mayor, while councils across the country are doing their best to provide a safe haven for people fleeing violence and terror across the world, and to integrate refugees into communities and to ensure that everyone has the support that they need, it often feels that in the current government, we do not have a true partner. Because instead of a government that matches our desire to give refugees a warm welcome for as long as they need, we have a conservative government with a history of demonizing refugees and immigrants through the dangerous rhetoric. We have the conservative government that has brought us to the hostile environment, the same government now placing people who have left their home countries with nothing except for hope of a better life, into barges or even sending them to Rwanda. These are political choices that have consequences, Mr. Mayor. Words count, actions matter, and that is why I hope that every councillor in this chamber will support this motion this evening so that we can send the message loud and clear that refugees are welcome in Ealing Borough.
Thank you, Councillor Lant. You're probably the one person I might have given extra time to tonight for reasons people will find out later. But Councillor Gallant next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and many congratulations on your taking up this arduous position as well. Congratulations. Congratulations to Councillor Brett and to Councillor Newstab as well for coming into the cabinet. And I'm sure where possible, and it's going to be on a range of issues, we'll work closely together. But we do not agree about many things in this debate. One thing I must say, Councillor Mahfouz, my first experience of a war-torn area was in Lebanon. I went as a very young musician and saw the devastation in Beirut, and it was really quite extraordinary, and it shocked me too. I didn't see, of course, anything like what you saw. I'll tell you a little story. Myself, I don't know how many councillors have been into the Stay Club and into the hotels that are currently housing asylum seekers in Ealing, but I go there on a regular basis. I take goods from Acton Charities, and that's a 400-year-old charity stewarded by the council, which is providing succor to people in need who don't really have very little, stewarded, of course, by our fantastic early start workers. Ukrainians, a conservative government was at the forefront of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, welcoming them here as soon as possible when the conflict erupted. And Ealing has responded fantastically well. So when families no longer can host, when they can no longer host, the council has taken them in and has put them up in hotels and has put them into property, and they've done an incredible job. And I always say it, hats off to our incredible officers. What about the BNO residents of the borough? How many Hong Kong residents are now resident in Ealing? Many. Mr. Mayor, it is a borough of sanctuary. And if you read our motion, our amendment to the motion, we want it to be a borough of sanctuary. We do. Now, what I'm sorry to say is the original motion just looks away from some horrible realities. You know, there are bogus asylum claims. There are people who should not be claiming asylum who are coming here. There is, and you can say what you like, there is a vast network. There is a vast network of people traffickers who operate right here in this borough. There are over 600 people arriving on small boats every day. And this problem is actually a new one. It happened when the security was tightened in the port of Calais. Suddenly people saw the opportunity to come in small boats. Now, the Labour motion in its original form just looks away from this problem and it provides no answers. And Mr. Mayor, this is a problem. This is what I call an opposition mentality. It says, we'll complain, you're in charge, we're not going to make any practical suggestions. I have to say, now I admit I had deep reservations about sending immigrations of any kind to Rwanda. When I heard that, I had my reservations, deep reservations, not least because it's impractical and risks legal challenge. But if that provision means that people do not attempt a channel crossing, then I am prepared to support it. You see, what is unarguable, and I disagree with what's unarguable is that channel crossings in small boats are unnecessary. Those people who attempt, they are not necessary. Sorry, those people attempting the crossing are able to put their case equally well in France, which is a safe country.
Okay, do you want to wind up, Councillor?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I'm finished, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I second our motion, our amendments.
Okay, Councillor Mason.
And there you have it for council. People who privately will describe themselves as one nation conservatives, compassionate conservatives who believe in liberty and freedom and prosperity, all of the values that we hold so dear as a country and extol to the world. But they're really willing to sit there and defend the indefensible. I say to the opposition, if you dislike so intensely a significant number of people in this chamber and outside, believing that your government's policies are motivated by racism, is to condemn them. Because, Councillor Gallant, it's not enough that you provide succor to the people in the Stay Club. It matters what you do about it. And over the last 13 years, your government has presided over consistent hostile environments that sent A-boards around Southall telling people to go home, that has failed to provide safe routes of entry into this country for people to claim asylum. And they come here because your party and our nation tells people that this is a place of sanctuary. 60% of the people who live in this great borough were born overseas. Many of them, in fact, many people in this room who have shared their stories and who will continue to share their stories this evening, are refugees themselves, fleeing war, persecution, poverty, and climate change. And this borough, in every one of their circumstances, has provided them with a safe home. It has said to them that you are part of us, that this is the place where you can put down your roots, where you can become part of our society and gradually, as is the case here, achieve representation. That is a very different tone to the tone that we are experiencing in our national political debate. Our national political debate, which is being corrupted by a political party who have presided over 13 years of failed government and know that the only way that they can defend their crumbling blue wall is to trot out the tropes and the dog whistles and the suggestions that the people who come to this country and the people that come to this borough are anything other than part of our society. I'm surprised when we issued this debate, when we put this motion down, that they would even bother to put forward an amendment. But just read it. Councillor Conti happily stands up and extols the virtues of welcoming to this country Ukrainians and BNO. And of course we do. And he says Afghans and he says Syrians. Is that in his motion? No. No, it's not. The one thing that is in their motion is the depraved and inhumane policy of deporting people to Rwanda, a policy that has been condemned, not just by people on both sides of the political debate in this country, but by all aspects of society and the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. We in this borough, and I'm proud to say, having met so many of those refugees who are taking sanctuary, are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and more. In this borough, we are providing safe sanctuary, and we will continue to do that in all circumstances, because ultimately we know that it's what matters in terms of what we do and not what we say. So I would strongly encourage the party opposite to withdraw their motion and to support the Labour motion to create our borough of sanctuary.
Okay, back on track. So we've got another 11, 12 speakers to go. So Councillor Alexander, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it's Pride Month, I would like to talk about LGBT refugees. Mr. Mayor, do you know the government has no idea how many LGBT people are in immigration accommodation? As the Home Office do not collect data despite the Home Affairs Committee raising concerns and the No Safe Refugees report in 2016, described a culture of bullying and discrimination to the LGBT community. How is that right? When the government are not even collecting data, it is wrong. As per usual, this Conservative government continues to fail to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. And it is right that we sign the National Fight the Anti-Refugee Laws pledge and support this motion. Mr. Mayor, the government's anti-refugee laws have provided a list of countries which the Conservative government have deemed safe. However, many organisations and other people have expressed concerns that some of the countries may not be safe if you identify as the LGBT. The government's one-size-fits-all approach will not work and could put people at risk of danger and harm. Mr. Mayor, I support this motion as this current government should be renamed the party of backlogs. In fact, in order to clear immigration claims, the government will need to make a total of 9,000 decisions per month to clear the backlog. As such, when the Conservative government helped Rishi Sunak find his backbone, I strongly suggest a general election now. Ealing and the country are sick of all the backlogs and want a clear leadership, which a Labour government will offer. Mr. Mayor, I can't imagine not waiting days, weeks or months, but years to hear an outcome of your application, remaining in limbo, not knowing whether you have to return to a place that you're not accepted or permitted to love who you want. To everyone in the chamber tonight, we must support this motion, as whether you were born in Ealing or came from further afield, once you have justifiable reasons, it should not matter how you arrive. Everyone should be treated with the dignity and the respect they deserve and are part of our wonderful, diverse community. I am proud that Ealing will be applying for Borough Sanctuary status. We are an inclusive borough. We believe in equality for all. Refugees seeking refuge in Ealing are welcome. They're not alone. They're our neighbours. And together we will continue to build a thriving community with love and unity at the centre of everything we do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. We'll try and speed up the backlog here as well. So I've got Councillor Anderson next as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to do my best, and I welcome you also to your post. And I hope that I wish you and the Deputy Mayor well for the year ahead. I also want to give thanks to Councillor Newstub for bringing forward this excellent motion, and also to Councillors Sashani, Manro, Mahfouz and Baklani for their incredibly powerful testimonies. For me, this motion asks actually a very, very simple question. Are we in Ealing the kind of people, the kind of borough that walks on the other side of the road when someone in need asks for our help? Mr. Mayor, I believe that our collective answer in this chamber must be a resounding no. Oppression of one group by another is as old as mankind itself, through every century and across every continent. Now, it is true, of course, that in our own lifetimes, Britain has come rightly to the aid of those whose lives are in danger because of who they are, the God they worship, or simply being caught in between two warring factions. And this evening, we've all been privileged to hear the moving stories from Uganda, from Lebanon, Kosovo, but we know there are so many more, be it the Kindertransport of young Jewish children in the 1930s escaping Hitler's Germany, or fleeing the Somali civil war in the 1980s and the 1990s. Yet in Britain in 2023, that compassion is too often missing. I think of the Afghans, whose simple desire to have the basic civic and political freedoms that we ourselves are enjoying tonight are squashed brutally by the Taliban. And as Councillor Alexander so rightly just said, given that it is Pride Month, it will be remiss of us not to recognise the thousands of LGBT plus people across the world who are forced to flee their own country so they can be safe and free just to be themselves. So who are we in Ealing to say to those fellow human beings, regardless of who they are, that we offer little more than a hostile environment and a one-way ticket to Rwanda? No freedom or dignity, Mr. Mayor, has ever been secured by that. And this motion, therefore, not only captures what I believe to be the instinctive spirit of generosity and compassion that is in our borough, but it also sets out a clear path for how we empower people who seek safety here to do what we all want to do, to contribute to our community, our shared home, and build a life in peace. And that's why I will be voting for this motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Raza next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I also welcome you to your place as well as the new cabinet members tonight. This is basically about inequality, isn't it? It's the stark contrast of some refugees being housed and bussed about on the whim of the Home Office, and those who are able to choose where they would like to live because of fact that they might be able to have a job and that they can actually afford to pick where they'd like to live. Dignity and compassion is really, really desperately needed. And refugees are people who are already being persecuted and are fleeing trauma, and more of the same is definitely not needed. The treatment the UK is giving refugees appears to be very, very dependent on their race, on their religion, on their politics, and their nationality. We need a fair and equal treatment to all that seek sanctuary in the UK for their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their politics, and their nationality. Policies of prison-like barges and flights to Rwanda are clearly not the answer. Frankly, it's an embarrassment which dishonors our proud tradition of being the place for sanctuary for all. The government must work closely and effectively with local authorities like ours, who actually deal with the very real consequences of their ill-thought-out policies. I'd like to share with you some observations of when I went to volunteer with Care for Calais in Calais. And I spoke with many who are actually qualified doctors, nurses, teachers, skilled workers who desperately are trying to get over to the UK. And we desperately need these skilled workers, yet they are stuck. I met unaccompanied minors from all over the world, and they have rights of their own, which are not being exercised there. They're also, on top of everything else, being terrorized nightly by the police at our behest, I understand. The obvious way to sort out this mess would be to start processing asylum claims in Calais, yet no such system exists. So many continue to run the gauntlet of crossing the channel wherever they can and really risk their lives of themselves and their children. So why not stay in France, I heard today? Well, maybe they don't want to stay in France. It's about choice, it's about freedom. And it's also about the chance that they might have British family quite willing and able to help them and to look after them. They have transferable qualifications because they might be from British protectorates, which would allow them to come here and work here and be useful. So this standoff continues. I've also been very honoured to have been warmly welcomed into the West London Ukrainian Centre. And we celebrated together national holidays with the community.
Can I actually wind up, please?
Community that's been given safe passage to the UK. So I'd just like to finally say that becoming a borough of sanctuary, as many others have done, is the right thing to do. And I hope colleagues on the Tory benches are applying their maximum pressure to their government to do the right thing, ditch hostile environment policy, give safe passage to all. And I know Labour in power will do all that we can to make sure that this happens. Diversity is our superpower in Ealing. As one of the most diverse boroughs, we've shown it time and again.
I need you to end it now. Don't take advantage.
That in times of crisis, we work best together in unity.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Look, I just said, I know it's a difficult thing. It's very emotive, but please don't take advantage of any friendships. Okay, I need to be fair to everybody. So I would have no friends by the end of this year. I know that. So Councillor Steed, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You
Mayor.
might be my only friend as my neighbour, you know.
I will be brief. I wish I could give some of my time back to Councillor Raza for her to finish her speech, but I don't think that's allowed, is it necessarily? I don't know. I also wholeheartedly commend the very moving and speeches that we've heard from Councillor Munro and Councillor Mafous and Councillor Baclini. It makes me feel somewhat inadequate, really saying anything with the experiences that they have been through with their families. I'm very sorry for them. The Lib Dem group wholeheartedly supports the motion. We agree that it is shameful with the extent to which successive Conservative governments have weaponised the issue of asylum seekers. It ignores the fact that until of late, the UK had a positive reputation for taking in asylum seekers. At times, this may partly have been almost accidental, but at certain crucial periods of history, it has been very much by plan. During the 16th century, the first of the French Protestants arrived in Britain, escaping persecution. They are regarded by some as the first refugees to come to our shores. It is estimated that 50,000 of them came over in number. They established a pattern of having a beneficial economic impact on Britain, revitalizing industry and kickstarting various manufacturing industries, such as cutlery making in Sheffield, and how we see that pattern replicated in more modern times. Successive groups of refugees have made a life in the UK and prospered and contributed to the life of the UK. The exodus of Jews from Russia in the latter half of the 19th century is well known, and is estimated that in the latter half of the 19th century, 200,000 arrived from Russia and Eastern Europe. Clearly, the period in the 1930s saw large numbers come to the UK, initially a trickle, but leading to large numbers. By the late 1930s, the numbers increased to include political opponents and trade unionists. By 1940, something like 80,000 Germans and Austrians had found refuge in the UK. This brief history does not seek to gloss over some of the problems that arose at the time. We know that there are those who seek to exploit these very tensions. However, one would hope that the government itself would not go down that particular path. On that basis, as I say, the Liberal Group will wholeheartedly support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steed. Councillor Brett next, 3 minutes maximum.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling me to speak on this motion. As we've heard tonight, Ealing has always been an open and inclusive borough. Embracing immigrants from across the world has given us a diverse, vibrant and exciting borough we live in. We only have to look around this room to see the embodiment of that. To be part of a council that is now enshrining our commitment to be a beacon of hope for the future makes me proud. Tonight, we've listened to the very personal experiences of some of our colleagues coming to this country as refugees. They have given us an insight into their human experience. And sometimes it's easy to forget the human stories of immigrants and refugees, especially with the kind of language that this government's Conservative government so flippantly uses. So it's good to be reminded of the real stories behind the headlines. I have, as well as everybody else, has been extremely concerned about the choice of language the Conservative government indulge in. The rhetoric about refugees and immigrants. As Councillor Mason has said, the tone, the dog whistle tone that is so frequently used sorry, I've just lost my place. I join so many colleagues here tonight in condemning plans to send refugees to third countries such as Rwanda, attempting to score cheap political points by demonising people who cross the channel in small boats rather than investing in real reform to create safe and legal routes that would help solve some of these issues. When in Dover a couple of years ago, I read a piece of graffiti that always resonates with me. The real enemy arrives by private jet, not by dinghy. Stating the obvious, nobody becomes a refugee by choice. In many cases, people fleeing war zones and seeking safety in another country are leaving behind careers they're proud of, homes that have been part of their family for generations, and much loved family members. Many of the refugees have come here as a last resort. Frankly, anybody could end up a refugee. So I'm proud of the welcome that people of Ealing have given refugees from Ukraine, Afghanistan, and other places across the world. I'm proud to see our values in action. It's lucky that Ealing is a Labour council and councils across the country were ready to step up to the challenge as we did. Because at times the support we have needed from our government hasn't been there. I want refugees across the world to know that here in Ealing, we will meet refugees with a warm welcome and make sure they feel safe and valued. And I believe that this motion is the first step in doing that. So I am proud to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'll stay seated. Sure. A while ago, a very sad and shocking picture appeared on the front pages of our newspapers. of the body of a small boy who drowned after the sinking of a small boat involved in human smuggling. It later emerged that this small boy was not being smuggled himself, but was the son of the smuggler. His death was still sad, but it highlighted the cruelty of the business. People smuggling is a despicable and dirty trade, putting vulnerable people onto overloaded small boats into the Channel, which is the busiest shipping lane in the world. We should be doing all that we can to stop these criminals plying their trade. In 2022, more than 150,000 Ukrainian refugees arrived in this country. We welcome them with open arms, as we welcome all true refugees. Incidentally, the government supported us in doing that by providing us with a £5 million grant last year to help us welcome the Ukrainians. There are special schemes, amongst others, in this country for refugees from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, and for the reuniting of refugee families. What the government are trying to prevent is people arriving in the UK by irregular means, because the money they pay for their crossing funds the trade and encourages more people to attempt the illegal passage into Britain. Asylum seekers are defined by the United Nations as persons who have fled their country to escape serious threat to their life and liberty. They are required to formally apply for asylum as soon as possible and in the first safe country in which they arrive. This means that there is no need for anyone to attempt a perilous crossing of the Channel. In the UK, the largest number of asylum seekers last year, more than a quarter of the whole, came from Albania, over 13,000 people. Albania is considered a safe country. Just recently, just last week, a Parliamentary Select Committee report has recommended it be defined as a safe country because it found no evidence of a threat to the vast majority of its residents. The next biggest number came from Afghanistan. We have a special scheme for taking on refugees from Afghanistan. There were nearly 4,000 Indians. And that India is the largest democracy in the world. It's another safe country. They shouldn't be seeking asylum in this country. Mr. Mayor, the Nationality and Borders Act and the Illegal Migration Bill seek to address the problem of unjustified claims overloading the system. We should be working closely with France to stop the small boats from leaving the beaches of northern France. We should be seeking to safeguard children who arrive here seeking asylum. We should be challenging young adults who seek to mix with them to prove their age, or so they are not being treated as they should be as adults.
Okay.
We should be providing more legal routes for asylum seekers to come into this country. We should stop the last-minute prevention of the removal of failed applicants. We should be doing all that we can to discourage illegal means of entry. And above all, we should stop the small boats and the doleful trade that this encourages. I support the amendment.
Thank you. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 6 more speakers. So I've got Councillor Camnagpal next.
Thank you for calling me to speak on this motion, Mr. Mayor. As the Cabinet Member for a Fairer Start, I have enjoyed working with the children and young people from across the world that have found a safe refuge in Ealing. It has undoubtedly brought its challenges. Those are sometimes practical, like having to provide new school spaces and overcoming language barriers. Sometimes the challenges require us to create services which can connect with children on an emotional level, easing the burden of the unimaginable trauma many children will have experienced on their journey to the UK. That includes making sure that schools and youth services are properly equipped to deal with these emotional scars. Having refugees and asylum seekers as part of our communities makes us richer as a council and as a society. So we have to start challenging the negative stereotypes that some associate with refugees and migrants. These are people. They have value. They are so much more than just small boat crossings and a political football for the Conservative Party to try to use to slow their rapid descent in the polls. Whether it's Mo Farah, who's brought pride to our country through sporting achievement, or Rita Ora, who has wowed audiences across the world since fleeing the war in Kosovo with her family. Whether it's Alf Dubs, who fled the horrors of Nazi Germany to become an advocate for child refugees across the world, or Judith Kerr, who left Germany around the same time and who has entertained generations of children with her books, or the colleagues who we've already heard from this evening, who have made similar journeys and are committed public servants. Refugees who have come to this country have often gone on to make homes here and leave our communities and our culture all the richer for it. Every child that comes to this borough has the potential to achieve greatness, and it is our job as councillors to make sure that they have the support, care, and love that they need to do this. I am proud to stand by refugees wherever they come from, and I'm proud to support this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. Councillor Rice, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling me to speak. Mr. Mayor, refugees arrive with a story, and colleagues tonight have had the opportunity to tell some of those stories. It is so important that we do not forget and that we continue to remind ourselves of what has happened to real people. What happened to my mum is not quite the same, although I believe it demonstrates its own relevance to the discussion. It was 1970, and my mum was 22 in communist Poland. She excelled at archery and competed abroad for her country in international competitions. There was even talk of her training for the Olympics. Mum refused to join the Communist Party, and she was brought in by the authorities, and they tried to force her into becoming a communist spy and informer while she was competing abroad. She was not tortured, however, she was absolutely terrified, as you can imagine. My maternal grandma came from a Jewish family, fought against anti-Semitism, and she had business contacts in the Jewish community in Golders Green. My grandma had to get my mum out of Poland as soon as possible, and so she asked her business contacts to make an invitation for my mum to come to London. They did this, and so my mum escaped to Golders Green and then to West London to start a new life. I would go on to be named after the two friends that she met, Miriam and Edna. My uncle was questioned by the authorities as to where my mum had gone, although he pretended not to know a thing, even though they threatened to destroy his career as a merchant seaman. What I do know is that my mum arrived on a proper ship all the way to the UK and not on some small boat. And the country which welcomed her was governed by a Tory government at the time, although the Conservative ministers were not, as far as I know, smiling wildly whilst publicly dreaming of plans to send desperate people to Rwanda. By the way, my mum visited Poland in 1976 after changing her name, and she took me with her when I was 2 years old. Polish soldiers stopped the train we were on. Mum was carrying magazines which were banned in Poland. And once again, she was terrified. But inadvertently, I saved the day this time, as before the soldiers opened our bags, I told my mum that I needed a nappy change, and the soldiers swiftly left the carriage. My family experiences have left me committed to campaigning against the extremes in our politics, whether they stem from the left or the right. And this Tory government is taking a hard right line towards refugees, which should leave them utterly ashamed. I have been campaigning for Labour in Kensington, and out there we've been meeting lifelong Conservatives who are telling us no more. Suella Braverman is a red line they will not cross. And Tories are losing votes because of her words and her policies. May the Tories continue to lose votes, and may those fleeing war and persecution continue to find refuge in Labour Ealing.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. As someone that comes to Milton Keynes, we have got a couple of viewers on YouTube tonight in Milton Keynes. One of them being my consort. Councillor Haley is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start my speech, I was sitting here absolutely livid, angry with my Conservative colleagues. You talk about Ukrainian refugees. What about the brown and the black people that came here way before the Ukrainians? How then did you treat us? How then did you behave with us? How then did you welcome us? And you have the audacity to sit opposite, especially when you heard different colleagues speak about their lived experience. You could never walk in our shoes. You don't know what it's like to be a refugee, to come from a country, your life to be destroyed. And Councillor Gallan, you talked about your trip to Lebanon after. Councillor detailed his pain because you went on a trip. I leave that as that. Think about that while I talk about my speech. Mr. Mayor, is extremely privileged to be speaking here this motion and be supporting this motion. We have seen an increase in refugees in recent years, particularly from Syria, from Afghanistan, and from Ukrainian, as well as Black people, migrant and Somali people, Africans, Caribbean people. People were forced to flee their homes due to various reasons, such as war. These individuals and families seeking safety in a chance for better life, often leaving behind everything they have known and loved, with no certainty what lies ahead. But we all know immigration has made Britain a better place. It's also important to understand that refugees are human beings like yourself, my Conservative colleagues. We have feelings. We are not numbers for you to tick off your boxing exercise. We are people with feelings. Therefore, we are humans with stories, courage, brave, and inspirations and hope. We deserve compassionate. We deserve respect. And we deserve support. Thank you very much. And also, as we and they have navigated our difficult journeys, at times it is so hard to put that on paper. It's so hard to articulate the things you go through. My father had arrived in this country when your party were leading, when your party were telling him to go back home because he doesn't look like a Black man. So my father had decided to go to Cardiff, where I was born. So we witness violence, discrimination every single day. I walk into a room where people think, where people think I don't speak English because all they see is my skin color and my headscarf. So when you talk about Ukrainians, you would have welcomed them anyway, because as a Labour Party councillor, I would fight for you. I would fight for them because they look like you. I'm sorry, I will finish up.
Are you about to finish now? Not in
Please,
half,
I
not in
swear,
half a minute.
1 minute, one minute. I'll get to my point. The
Can you
Tory
end that,
government
please?
continues to press, please, with a shameful Rwandan scheme while failing to lift the bans for refugee and asylum seekers. We need to challenge stereotyping, prejudice, and promote greater understanding what diverse cultures, experience of refugees bring into our society.
Right,
In Ealing Borough,
Councillor,
in Ealing Borough, we have made a significant contribution to the community. I will end it with this. Let's stand together, show solidarity, show support with refugees who made a great impact in the UK and Ealing Borough. Their contribution should be recognised and celebrated. I too am proud, extreme, to be standing here tonight as a daughter of a refugee. Let me remind you, a daughter of a refugee, and also to be elected as a councillor to change, hear my voice for this motion and support, and I will forever educate your party.
Okay. I told you I have no friends left at the end of this process at all. But look, I appreciate, but we have to stick to time as well. But I've got three final speakers, or one final speaker for to summing up. So, Councillor Stafford, did you want to come up?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This debate, I feel, has never been more clear of the old adage that we think that Labour is wrong and Labour thinks that we are evil. And that does not lead to a rational and sensible debate. And as much as I sympathise and could never experience some of the appalling circumstances that we've heard about tonight, that does not give people the right to make baseless accusations about myself and my colleagues and our views.
Now, many of the Labour speeches tonight seem to be opposed to any control on immigration. Now, that's a perfectly valid view, not one I agree with, but it's a perfectly valid view. A smaller number of Labour speakers seem to agree that there should be some control on immigration, but unfortunately not one proposed either a better or even a similarly adequate alternative. Now, many of us, as we've heard in this chamber, are refugees, children of refugees, or grandchildren of refugees, including myself. We recognise their sacrifice and we appreciate the contribution that they make to our country and our borough. Indeed, I am proud, and I'm not going to be apologetic, I am proud of the work that the government has done, helping Ukraine, standing up to the aggressor in Russia, and I'm proud of the work they've done to welcome Ukrainian citizens to this country. And I have to say, as an aside, I'm humbled to be the chairman of a charity that has raised over £30,000 for Ukraine since the beginning of the war. But we must ensure that those people who come do so legally, fairly, and above all, safely. People are dying in the Channel, and therefore we must stop the small boats. We must ensure that where possible, people reside and stay in their first safe country that they arrive in. We do need to provide appropriate and even more safe routes like the Afghanistan scheme. And unfortunately, we do also need to provide a deterrent. Because if we don't, people will continue to die in the Channel whilst the traffickers get rich. So I do support the government's attempts to stop the small boats, to bring in a safe and fair scheme to help refugees. And I support our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. Right, I've got Councillor Eastham to sum up the main motion. And you're not getting more than 3 minutes this time.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I've got it on the sheet. No, you're quite right. Councillor Conti, so you can wait for your 3 minutes. You've got 3 minutes to sum up the amendment. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Manro, Mafus, Baclini, Councillor Rice, and Councillor Haley for outlining or sharing their stories with us. I think they were all really moving. And I think, Councillor Haley, what you said about the contribution that refugees, immigrants have made to this country, I don't think anyone in this chamber would disagree with that. I think it enriches us, not just here in Ealing, but across the country in terms of the contributions people have made. I do think, however, that there is a legitimate argument to be made about how we prevent people dying in the Channel and the illegal crossings that are happening, because the only people that are benefiting from that are the criminal gangs who often, these people who have travelled a long way and often, through difficult journeys, use their whole life savings to be put into a boat to risk their lives. Now, I think there are many things in this debate tonight that we've spoken about what we disagree on, but I think there are many things that we can agree on. Clearly, clearing the backlog is incredibly important. The fact that we've got people waiting in hotels for months and months, if not years, is unacceptable. And so, Councillor Crawford, I think I'm saying that we do need to bear down on that, and I know that that is part of what the government's objectives are. Now, I think it was Councillor Mafus who said that words matter, and I think words do matter, and they matter on all sides of this debate. I think rhetoric regarding migrants, obviously stokes a lot of tension, but also statements like that, we represent a far-right government. I think that's not a country that has accepted and brought in 500,000 people over the last few years from the likes of Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and beyond, isn't a country that is operating under a far-right government. So look, I think that there are things in this motion that we agree on, but there are different approaches that we see about tackling it. The last thing I just want to say on the Liberal Democrats was that, that they're supporting this motion. One of the things that one of the real challenges getting people out of hotels is accommodation and housing. Across the country, the Lib Dems nationally oppose almost every single development possible. And so if we want to be able to provide extra accommodation, I think it's a contortion to try and have those two different policies. So in the end, our amended motion with hoping people will support that this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Conte. Councillor Neestup, do you want to sum up the main motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. You'll be delighted to hear I won't be using my 3 minutes because I can't really follow the words of my colleagues. They've shown and shared their experiences, and it's clearly been an incredibly emotional evening. What I will do is promise to pursue our status as a borough of sanctuary rigorously and at pace. And I promise it will not just be a tick box exercise. It will be a convening force. It will be a driving force to make us better and to make us genuinely a borough of sanctuary for the most vulnerable. And to go in some way to answer your point, we do know that this can be done well and with compassion and imagination and openness, because I agree, it has been done with Ukrainians coming to this country. I would just ask that that's extended to everyone. Thank you, everyone, for their contributions.
Thank you, Councillor. So, members, you've had the full debate. You've all, everybody on the list has spoken here tonight, and amendments being moved and seconded. So I'm going to go with the amendment first. All those in favour of the amendment? Was there? Thank you. All right. All right. I told you no heckling. And so all those in favour of the amendment, first of all. Okay. All those against? All right. Therefore, the amendment therefore falls.
To move procedural votes for a recorded vote on the substantive motion. Second.
Oh, okay. Have we got 3 members? I didn't ask for abstentions on the amendment, sorry. Any abstentions on the amendment, first of all? No. So the Chief Exec is going to ask, read out names of each member, and the Head of Democratic Services will record their vote for the minutes. And because you've all moved, we've got a new plan.
Councillor Shaw, Councillor Mason, Councillor Jay Anand, Councillor Mahfouz, Councillor Manro, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Kamaljit Nagpal, Councillor Blacker, Councillor Brett, Councillor Newstub, Councillor R. Wall, Councillor Kingston, Councillor Haley, Councillor Kelly, Councillor D. Martin, Councillor Padder, Councillor Rice, Councillor M. Ahmed, Councillor Mahmood, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Khan, Councillor S. Ahmed, Councillor Coley, Councillor Driscoll, Councillor P. Anand, Councillor Mohan, Councillor Ranjit Deer, Councillor Kaur Deer, Councillor Jammu, Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Mataza, Councillor Sidhu, Councillor J. Martin, Councillor K. Crawford, Councillor Dinsa, Councillor Rai, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Hashani, Councillor L. Wall, Councillor Summers, Councillor Chassel, Councillor Alexander, Councillor Hamidi, Councillor Baines, online, Councillor Mohammed, Councillor Kwanzaa, Councillor Sahota, Councillor D. Crawford, Councillor Raza, Councillor Mida, Councillor Nijar, Councillor Baklini, Councillor Wesson, Councillor Taig, Councillor Gallant,
Yes.
Councillor Kumar, Councillor Conti, Councillor Young, Councillor Stafford, Councillor Ball, Councillor Hirsch, Councillor Zizamos, Councillor Malcolm, Councillor Steed, Councillor Busuttil, Deputy Mayor, Mayor.
All right, so that amendment's now defeated. So we go to the main motion. That was.
Sorry, sorry, I was missed.
Councillor Kane Agpal.
For.
Sorry, motion, I've got confused now. Thank you very much. Right, I think that's that motion done. Motion carried. Motion carried. Right, thank you. So we're now on to motions not for debate. We can hopefully speed through these. So the first one is I have one motion not for debate submitted. Amendment to the motion not for debate has also been submitted. And I'm just reading it out now. Is the motion moved?
I move it formally.
Is it seconded?
I second the motion.
Is the amendment moved? Is the amendment seconded? All those in favour of the amendment? Okay, all those against the amendment? Any abstentions? No, okay, therefore the amendment is therefore carried. I'll now move on to the vote on the motion. All those in favour of the motion as amended? Okay, so everybody, all those against? And any abstentions? That one is therefore carried. All right, I think we're on the last item almost. Oh, yeah, we are. Appointments to appointments to committees and outside bodies. Are the appointments to committees and outside bodies agreed? Agreed. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. There is just one more thing I do need to mention on behalf of the past mayor, Councillor Midder. Some of you owe her some money. So, aside from that, thank you very much for your presence tonight, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.